The first thing I noticed was the sound of his shoes. Not his voice. Not the starched collar or the high-performance smartwatch. Just the rhythmic, calculated tapping echoing down the glass-lined hallway, like a countdown. That's how Nathan Cole arrived at Everwyn Global's Chicago tower. Freshly appointed as CEO at 38 and already act. He didn't greet the receptionist. Didn't thank the security guard who held the door. He moved with the kind of self-assurance that didn't pause for anyone. I watched from my quiet office on the 14th floor, a space wedged between international development and legal affairs. 17 years I'd been here. Through buyouts, downsizing, a near collapse during the 2008 crisis, I stayed. Adapted, guided, not with speeches or slogans. But I'm Mila Hart. I don't wear statement blazers or fight for the spotlight in meetings. But I understand every lever in this place. Every relationship. Every hidden fracture. So when Nathan stepped out of the elevator and surveyed his kingdom like a man shopping for things to replace, I felt it. The shift in air pressure. And I didn't look away. The laughter was the first to disappear. It didn't happen all at once. Just slowly, like steam fading from a once boiling pot. One day it was a joke near the printer. A chuckle from marketing after a pitch gone wrong. The next, it was silence. Doors stayed shut. Eyes stayed down. Conversation took on that clipped, polished tone you only hear at funerals or layoffs. Nathan Cole hadn't made any formal announcements yet. But he didn't need to. The message was in the energy. Meetings became tighter, shorter. Efficiency audits began surfacing in whispered conversations. And people started moving differently, quicker, more alert, like prey in tall grass. I didn't panic. I've seen new regimes before. I've been passed over, spoken over, underestimated. It's the currency women like me know how to spend carefully. I didn't rattle cages. I took notes, watched patterns, listened to silences. And the silences were growing louder. Within a week, the first one vanished, Mark. From procurement, his desk was cleared before lunchtime. No goodbye email, no exit memo, just a blinking cursor where his name had been in the team directory. Then Ava from Digital Strategy. Same story. Their replacements arrived before the chairs cooled, young, sharp-suited, enthusiastic. Their resumes sparkled. Their understanding of the company's culture? Paper thin. They spoke in confident buzzwords and dropped acronyms like breadcrumbs. But when I asked one of them about an ongoing dispute with a legacy vendor in Osaka, he stared at me like I'd spoken Swahili. We're modernizing, Nathan said during the weekly stand-up. His smile sharp, his words smoother than the marble floors in the lobby. It's time to remove redundancies and streamline for the future. Redundancies. That word. It hung in the air like poison. I wasn't shocked. Nathan's type always saw experience as dead weight. If you couldn't be measured on a dashboard or replaced by a service agreement, you were expendable. And I knew I was on that list. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. I didn't cry. I didn't clench my fists. I just prepared. I began cataloging everything I'd built. Not reports or memos, relationships. The ones I'd nurtured quietly, consistently. Clients in South Korea who'd sent handwritten thank you cards after delicate negotiations. Partners in Vietnam who insisted on scheduling around my availability. A regional deal in Hong Kong that had nearly fallen apart until I bridged a cultural misunderstanding with 3 simple sentences in fluent Cantonese. None of it was on the official ledger. But it was mine. And Nathan? He didn't even know the depth of what he was discarding. The breaking point came on a Tuesday. The team had been summoned to a mandatory alignment session in the executive boardroom. It was the kind of thing Nathan liked to stage, sleek slides, motivational one-liners, and pauses long enough for dramatic effect. He walked in with 2 of his new hires, both beaming with ambition and oblivious to the tension in the room. We're stepping into a new chapter, he said, one built on clarity, agility, and global compatibility. Global compatibility. He meant outsourcing. We've decided to consolidate our international services. He continued, which means some roles will shift. Others will sunset. He didn't look at me when he said it. But I knew. At 10:43 a.m. The calendar ping came in. Meeting request, Nathan Cole. 11:15 a.m. Room 4B. No subject, no details, just silence dressed in protocol. I closed my laptop and took a slow breath. No panic, just purpose. The hallway to room 4B felt longer than usual. As I walked, people avoided my gaze, averted eyes, half smiles, guilt, sympathy, fear. They all looked the same in a corporate hallway. Only Rachel from accounting met my eyes. She gave me a small nod. Not pity, respect. Inside, the blinds were half drawn. Nathan sat across from Dana, our HR director, who looked as if she hadn't slept in a week. Mila, Nathan said smoothly, gesturing toward the chair. Thanks for coming. Dana pushed an envelope toward me. Her hands trembled just slightly. Nathan leaned forward. You've been a tremendous asset to Everwyn Global. But as we pivot, some functions, like yours, no longer align with our strategy. We've partnered with a language tech firm out of Singapore that will handle localization moving forward. He smiled, a PR smile, the kind that tries to soften the knife. This isn't personal, it's transformation. I stared at the envelope. I didn't touch it. Are you certain? I said quietly. You understand what I actually do here? Nathan blinked. You're our cultural translator and international communications liaison. Correct? Contract support, linguistic advisory. No, I was the reason our Tokyo deal closed in 3 days instead of 3 weeks. The reason our Southeast Asia division hadn't imploded during the last leadership shuffle. The reason our global trust rating held firm during the last crisis. But I said none of that. Instead, I rose slowly. Then I wish you luck. I said evenly, especially on Friday. Nathan frowned. What's Friday? But I was already walking out. No door slam, no dramatic exit, just the soft click of my heels echoing down a hallway now emptied of trust. Friday arrived under a gray Chicago sky, the kind of heavy overcast that blurred the skyline and dulled the windows of Everwyn Global's shimmering tower. Inside, the boardroom on the 15th floor was immaculate, gleaming glass table. Curated pastries no one would eat. Polished nameplates aligned with robotic precision. Nathan Cole stood at the head of the room like he always did, confident. Poised, dressed in tailored charcoal. Beside him, 2 new VPs, both barely past 30, both beaming like kids on the first day of school. On the agenda, the renewal of a multi-year strategic partnership with Hanari Group. A powerful logistics and technology conglomerate based in Seoul. A deal worth over $30 million. A deal I had personally built from the ground up over 7 years. I wasn't in the room. But I knew how it would go. The Hanari delegation arrived precisely at 10 a.m. Mr. Ryu, the group's global partnerships director, entered first, stoic, reserved, flanked by Ms. Cho and Mr. Kwan. Impeccably dressed, unreadable expressions. They bowed politely. Nathan extended a hand instead. Mistake number 1. Welcome to Everwyn, he said with a broad grin, motioning them to their seats. We're thrilled to continue growing together in this exciting new chapter. He launched into his presentation. Slides, numbers, projections. He used phrases like market synergy and accelerated ROI. The Hanari team said little. They took notes. They asked no questions. They didn't interrupt. Mistake number 2. Nathan thought silence meant agreement. Halfway through, he referenced their joint sustainability initiative from last year, the one I had guided through hours of late-night calls and delicate cultural negotiations. But he got the name wrong. Called it Green Line Strategy instead of the Harmony Track. No one corrected him. They didn't need to. At 10:42 a.m., Mr. Ryu closed his notebook. Before we continue, he said quietly, may I ask, where is Ms. Mila Hart? Nathan blinked. Mila? He repeated, voice faltering for the first time. She's no longer with the company. We've restructured to streamline international operations. You'll be working with our new global engagement team, led by Lattice Consulting in Singapore. Very cutting edge. A long silence. Then Ms. Cho spoke, her English precise and cold. We were not informed of this change. I assumed that had been communicated. Nathan replied, shifting in his seat. We're confident the transition will be seamless. In fact, you'll have access to multiple specialists. Mr. Ryu raised a hand gently, cutting him off. Mila Hart was not a specialist. He said evenly. She was our bridge. She understood our concerns without translation. She honored our traditions. She showed restraint when others pushed too hard. Nathan forced a laugh. Of course. And we absolutely value what she. There will be no renewal. Mr. Ryu interrupted. We've lost confidence. He rose. So did Ms. Cho and Mr. Kwan. Nathan scrambled. Panic barely veiled behind a tight smile. I'm sure we can revisit the terms. We're open to. Mr. Kwan bowed slightly. Voice clipped. Your company removed the one person we trusted. We're not here to renegotiate. We're here to withdraw. They walked out. 10 minutes. That's how long it took to dismantle a deal that had taken years to build. Across the city, I sat in my modest new office at Lawson & Reed. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. My desk was temporary, but the respect in the room wasn't. I sipped green tea, scrolling through onboarding documents when my phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. They just walked out. Hanari's gone. Nathan looks like he's been gut punched. You did this, didn't you? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. It wasn't revenge. It was the consequence of arrogance. Nathan hadn't just removed me. He'd severed something vital. Something irreplaceable. Trust. And trust, once betrayed, doesn't come back because you hired a consulting firm or put a new face in the room. He thought I was just a translator. A role on a spreadsheet. A box to check. But I wasn't. I was the history. The memory. The unspoken knowledge of who bowed first. Who shook last. Who needed time before signing and who needed eye contact before trusting. He erased me, but what he couldn't erase was everything I had imprinted into those relationships. By noon, word had already spread. 2 other international partners quietly paused contract talks. One asked if I was available, in any capacity. Another simply said, let us know where Mila goes. And now, they knew. At 4:07 p.m., Alex Meyer, Lawson & Reed's managing director, knocked on my office door. Mila, he said, you're not going to believe this. Hanari just called us directly. They said, and I quote, we prefer to work with the person who never wasted our time pretending to understand. I smiled faintly, not smug, just, complete. They want you to lead the transition. He added, they said they don't need a contract right away. Just your word. And I gave it, not with noise, not with spectacle, just a quiet yes, because sometimes the loudest victories come from silence, from what's no longer said in the wrong rooms, and what is deeply understood in the right ones. Nathan would never know what really hit him, but he'd feel it, every client lost, every call ignored, every subtle nod of refusal. And I would be right where I belonged, not back, not beneath, not vindicated, but beyond. I used to believe survival in the corporate world meant staying invisible just long enough to stay indispensable. 17 years at Everwyn Global had taught me that. Keep your head down. Let your results speak for you. Don't outshine the men in the room. Be the last to speak and the first to notice what no one else does. It worked, for a while. But now, sitting across from Alex Meyer at Lawson & Reed, listening to him talk through a multi-market strategy that bore my fingerprints even before he realized it, I began to see something else. Maybe I hadn't been surviving all those years. Maybe I'd been shrinking. Mila, he said, clicking to the next slide. I've never seen Hanari move that fast for anyone. They trust you more than they trust our whole firm. I didn't deflect. I didn't shrug or downplay. I just nodded. I earned that, I said quietly. And it surprised me how right it felt to say it out loud. That weekend, I cleared out the last drawer of my home office. I found the old project binder from the Kyoto delegation in 2015. The one where our entire presentation had been derailed by a single mistranslation. I remembered how I had stayed up that night rewriting slides with the help of a translator and a pot of bitter green tea. Only for the CEO to later call me personally and thank me for saving face in front of his board. There had been no bonus that year. No public credit. Just a story that lived only in my memory. Until now. Now those stories mattered. Every partner who called to ask where I had gone. Every email that began with, "We trusted her judgment," wasn't just nostalgia. It was clarity. I had built something more durable than brand loyalty. I had built respect. And that was the shift. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was seeing myself, fully. The calls kept coming. First from Oslo, then Melbourne, then Toronto. Different time zones. Same tone. We heard you've moved. We'd like to talk. Not because of LinkedIn updates or press releases, but through whispers, recommendations, real human conversations. The kind of network that can't be bought or strategized. It made me think about how often we let ourselves be measured by the wrong metrics: headcount, salary band, how many eyes are on us in the room. But I was being measured now by something deeper. How people felt when I spoke. What they remembered when I left. One night, I stayed late at the office. The city buzzed below, a ribbon of headlights stretching into the distance. I had just finished a call with a legacy partner from Seoul. He didn't want to talk numbers. He just wanted to know, was I happy now? I paused longer than I expected. I said slowly, I'm learning how to be. And I meant it. At Everwyn, I'd become a ghost of who I used to be. No malice, just erosion. The kind that happens over years, one missed opportunity at a time. One ignored comment, one leadership transition that forgot what you carried. You learn to stop correcting people when they forget your title. You learn to carry the whole meeting and let someone else get the applause. You convince yourself that your silence is strength. But silence can also be a cage. Lawson and Reed didn't hand me a corner office. They didn't promise me titles or empty praises. But they gave me something else: room. Room to lead. Room to breathe. Room to walk into a pitch meeting and not be the cultural piece, but the closer. And that changed everything. Even the way I dressed shifted. Not because I needed armor anymore, but because I didn't. Soft blouses, quiet colors, comfortable heels, clothes that let me move, not shrink. And when I moved, people noticed. One morning, I stepped into the shared kitchen and found two junior associates whispering over a pitch deck. They stiffened when I entered. Like I'd caught them doing something wrong. I smiled gently. You know the client in Jakarta prefers visuals on the right side of the page. Yes? They blinked. We didn't. How did you know that? I remember. I said, that's all. Pay attention. They notice. They looked at each other. Then one of them asked, could you look at our draft before the meeting? I did. Not because I had to. Because someone had once done that for me. Perspective isn't just about where you're standing. It's about what you choose to carry forward. And I wasn't carrying resentment anymore. I was carrying standards, expectations, proof. Back at Everwyn, Nathan's empire was starting to unravel in whispers. A contact from inside forwarded me a screenshot from an internal thread. Can anyone explain why the Seoul office is ghosting us? I didn't laugh. I didn't gloat. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about realignment. Trust had quietly packed its bags and followed me out the door. And now, I was building something stronger, one call, one handshake, one decision at a time. Not because I wanted to prove I had been valuable. Because I no longer needed to. I was the value. The email subject line was simple. Proposal. Private advisory opportunity. Sender. Daejeon Group. Office of the Chairman. I read it 3 times before clicking. Not because I was surprised. But because I already knew what it meant. A week earlier, I'd taken a quiet call from Mr. Kang's assistant, the same Mr. Kong who had led Daejeon's delegation out of Everwyn's boardroom without so much as a backward glance. We hadn't spoken since, but the tone had been unmistakable. They wanted something bigger. And they wanted it from me. Now, the email laid it out clearly. We are considering establishing an independent advisory board for our cross-regional expansion in North America. We believe your experience and integrity are aligned with our vision. If interested, we would like to invite you to Seoul for a closed-door discussion. No title, no expectations, no guarantees, just respect. I stared at the screen. Unmoving. I could feel my heart pounding, not with fear, but something deeper, recognition. They weren't just offering a position. They were offering me a voice. 3 weeks later, I sat at a long mahogany table in a private room at the Daejeon Group headquarters. It was early spring in Seoul, cool, clear, the trees just beginning to bloom with white-pink buds. The city outside buzzed in quiet rhythm. But inside the room, all was still. Mr. Kong entered alone. He didn't bring an entourage. No layers of middlemen, just himself. He bowed. So did I. Mila, he said softly, you are not easy to replace. And thankfully, we no longer have to try. I didn't smile. Not fully. I just nodded. He gestured to a thick folder on the table. We'd like you to be our chief external affairs advisor. Not in name only. We want your judgment, your voice, and your leadership, starting with a direct role in guiding our U.S. expansion strategy. I opened the folder. It wasn't flashy. No stock photos. No bullet point promises. Just pages filled with timelines, risks, names of stakeholders, legacy vendors, and one line at the end. The role is yours, if you want it, but you define the terms. I exhaled slowly. Define the terms. It was the most powerful thing anyone had ever said to me professionally. The flight home was quiet. I didn't update LinkedIn. I didn't text anyone. I sat in the window seat and stared at the ocean below. Thinking. This opportunity was bigger than any role I'd ever held. It wasn't about prestige. It was about impact. And not just for Daejeon. For me. I could choose my team. I could build a blueprint that honored both efficiency and empathy, expansion and respect. But more than that, I could become what I had always searched for in boardrooms and backrooms, a protector of trust. When I returned to Chicago, I requested a private meeting with Alex Meyer at Lawson & Reed. His office was modest but efficient, the kind that didn't need art to feel important. He offered coffee. I declined. I need to talk to you, I said. About what's next? He leaned forward, hands clasped. Go on. I've been offered a role. I began. It's high level, global, strategic, and I want to accept it. But I don't want to just leave. I want to build something with you. I want us to become the bridge between companies like Daejeon and the North American market. I want to mentor a team that understands cultural fluency, not just language. Alex was quiet. Then he smiled. Wide, genuine. You want to create the future version of you, he said. I nodded. He reached for his notebook. Let's build it. And we did. Within 2 months, I split my time. 2 weeks in Seoul, 2 in Chicago. We formed a new unit at Lawson & Reed, Cultural Strategy and Partnership Integrity. It wasn't just about translating words. It was about translating intent. I handpicked a team, diverse, curious, deeply observant, not the loudest voices, the sharpest listeners. We didn't pitch aggressively. We listened. We asked questions. We honored silences. We showed up on time and left room for nuance. We didn't just sign contracts. We built continuity. And clients noticed. Tokyo called. Then Jakarta. Then Berlin. Not with desperation, but with hope. If Mila's involved, they'd say, we trust the process. Back at Everwyn, Nathan Cole had been replaced. A quiet press release. A short internal memo. Pursuing other opportunities. I didn't react. Not even when someone forwarded me the article with a smiling emoji. I had no desire to dance on anyone's ashes. Because this was never about destruction. It was about construction. The new opportunity didn't make me louder. It made me more deliberate. One day, as I walked out of a client meeting in Seoul, a junior partner jogged to catch up with me. Ms. Hart, she asked breathlessly, how did you know to pause before responding when they brought up the honor system? I smiled gently. Because I've made the mistake of responding too soon before. I said, cultural fluency isn't about speed. It's about presence. She nodded, eyes wide. I could see it. The seed taking root. It was never just about me. It was about legacy. Not what you leave behind when you're gone, but what lives on in the quiet lessons people carry forward. I was no longer the ghost in the glass office. I was the architect of something new. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't asking for permission to lead. I was simply leading. The first time someone called me an executive, I almost corrected them. It was during a leadership dinner in Singapore, round table. Low lights, soft jazz humming in the background. I was seated beside the director of a large investment firm. We'd just finished a panel on cross-border negotiations. And she raised her glass in a casual toast. To the only executive in the room who doesn't need a microphone to command one. The table chuckled. I smiled politely. But in my head, I heard that familiar voice. That instinct that used to tell me to shrink. Don't stand too tall. Don't accept too much. But I didn't say a word to contradict her. Because it was true. I wasn't an assistant. I wasn't the translator. I wasn't the shadow figure in the corner taking notes no one asked for. I was shaping international strategy for billion-dollar partnerships. I was building teams across continents. I was the person people called when negotiations fell apart or never began. Not because I was loud, but because I was consistent. At Lawson & Reed, I had become more than a consultant. I was now a mentor, a strategist, a model. And yet, I didn't change my tone or pace. I didn't switch to power suits or demand a title on my office door. I still paused before I answered. Still carried my tea in a ceramic mug from Seoul, not a stainless steel tumbler. Still listened more than I spoke. What changed was how people responded. There's something magnetic about someone who is completely, unapologetically whole. No performance, no chase, just clarity. I didn't have to fight for my seat anymore, because now people were pulling out chairs beside me. One morning, as I prepared to step into a strategy session with a German logistics partner, an associate from the legal team stopped me outside the door. Mila, he said, almost nervous. Quick question. How do you know when a room is ready to hear you? I blinked, surprised. Then I said, I don't wait for readiness. I listen for resistance. And then I start where they are, not where I want them to be. He scribbled that down like a quote from a textbook. I wasn't trying to be wise. I was just telling the truth. That's when I realized growth isn't always loud or linear. Sometimes, it's a series of small shifts that add up to transformation. I'd stopped chasing perfection, the version of me that once triple-checked every comma, rehearsed every pitch, and rewrote her own ideas in someone else's voice. She was gone. Now, I trusted my own fluency. In language, in timing, in self. One afternoon, a junior strategist named Camille asked if she could shadow me during a client meeting. She was bright, intuitive, but hesitant, exactly how I used to be. She watched as I opened the meeting with a gentle acknowledgement of the client's time zone and a brief story about a shared cultural tradition. Nothing dramatic, just human. After the call, Camille asked, "You didn't even talk about the contract until the last 10 minutes. Why?" I smiled. Because relationships carry the contract, not the other way around. That's when I saw it click for her. The lesson I'd taken years to learn. And maybe that's what growth really is. Not just getting better at your craft, but reaching a place where you can teach others without insecurity, without ego, with generosity. Outside of work, I had changed too. I no longer walked into rooms apologizing for being tired, or for having boundaries. I stopped responding to late-night emails with urgency. Stopped saying yes when I meant maybe. Stopped nodding when I wanted to say no. I spent Saturdays visiting bookstores again. The quiet kind, the ones with paper dust and handwritten staff pics. I reconnected with my sister after 5 years of short messages and missed birthdays. I started writing again, private essays. Little fragments of thought, not to be read, just to be remembered. And one evening, alone in my apartment, I stood in front of the mirror, not to check my outfit, but just to look. Not for flaws, not to judge, just to see the woman I had become. She wasn't louder. She wasn't flashier. She was anchored. She knew when to walk away. She knew when to stay silent. And she knew, without a shadow of a doubt, what she was worth. One day, a call came from someone still at Everwyn. It wasn't an apology, just a quiet question. "Mila, how did you know it was time to leave?" I thought for a long moment before answering. "I didn't," I said honestly. "I just knew it was time to stop waiting to be seen. And start choosing spaces that saw me." There was silence on the other end. Then a small voice. "Thank you. They used to say I was invisible. Now I was undeniable. Not because I raised my voice, but because I raised my standard. And I never lowered it again." The knock came at exactly 9 a.m. I was in the middle of pouring jasmine tea into a small ceramic cup. The same one I'd brought back from Kyoto 7 years ago. Its edges were slightly chipped, but it still held warmth like it always had. The receptionist buzzed in. "He's here. Do you want me to escort him up?" I took a breath. "No, I'll greet him myself." Nathan Cole stood in the lobby of Lawson & Reed like a man who hadn't decided if he was here to apologize or to pitch. His once pristine suit looked like it had spent the night folded on the edge of a couch. His smile, too practiced, faltered when our eyes met. "Mila," he said, stepping forward, "thanks for taking the time." I nodded once. "This way." We walked down the hallway, his steps heavier than I remembered. The same man who once moved like he owned every room now moved like he wasn't sure he belonged in any. I led him into a quiet, glass-walled conference room. No fanfare, no assistants, just 2 chairs and a table between us. He sat. I didn't. Not yet. Nathan looked up at me, eyes searching for some familiar rhythm to fall into. But the air was different now. I wasn't angry. I wasn't fragile. I was still. "I know things didn't end well," he began, stumbling slightly over the phrasing. "But I was hoping we could discuss possibilities." I sat down. "Possibilities?" I echoed. He nodded quickly. "Everwyn is struggling with some international accounts, relationships we fumbled. Honestly, I think I underestimated just how critical your work was. I'd like to explore the idea of bringing you in, maybe not full-time, but consulting, quietly, just help us rebuild what we lost." I didn't respond immediately, because I was watching him. Not just his words, but the cracks between them. The hesitations, the glances toward the window. As if he could escape through glass. "I'm not angry at you, Nathan," I said finally. He blinked, caught off guard. "I never was." I continued. "You didn't know what I carried. That's not surprising. Most people don't. But what is surprising is that you only saw the surface and made decisions for an entire global strategy based on assumptions." He tried to interrupt, but I raised a hand. "I'm not here to rehash the past," I said calmly. "I'm here to say this clearly. You don't get to erase value and then ask for it back when it becomes convenient." Nathan lowered his gaze. "The bridges you burned weren't just external. They were internal. And what you lost can't be fixed by hiring me back under a different label." He exhaled slowly. "So, this is a no?" I smiled gently. "This is me telling you that the damage isn't mine to undo." For the first time, Nathan didn't argue. He nodded, quietly, almost gratefully. He stood, his hand hesitating in the air like he wasn't sure whether to offer it. "I wish I had listened to you sooner," he said. I didn't respond. Some lessons don't require a reply. When he left, I didn't feel triumph. I felt closure. And it was cleaner than I imagined. No bitterness, just clarity. It was never about winning against him. It was about no longer needing to be in the same game. That afternoon, I took the long way home. Walked along the lakefront path, where the wind always carried something: salt, laughter, promise. I paused by a bench overlooking the water. The skyline shimmered in the distance. Tall and cold and beautiful. This city had watched me become invisible. Then it had watched me come back, not louder, but stronger. And somewhere out there, in offices I no longer walked through, my absence still echoed. I wasn't a ghost. I was gravity. And now, I wasn't just leading. I was redefining what leadership looked like. Months passed. At Lawson & Reed, our division grew, organically. Quietly. 1 client turned into 5. Then 10. Then word spread. "If you want a firm that understands nuance, call Mila Hart." We didn't advertise. We didn't pitch aggressively. We just listened better than anyone else. One day, a younger team member stopped me in the hallway. "I heard what happened at Everwyn," she said softly, almost reverently. "The way you handled it, that changed how I see this work. It showed me you don't have to yell to be powerful." I paused, then said, "Power isn't volume. It's value you don't apologize for anymore." She nodded, and I knew she'd carry that forward. The world I used to operate in, the one that rewarded loud voices and fast turnover, was shifting. People were paying attention now to the soft skills. The quiet power. The ones who weren't trending on social media, but who could walk into any boardroom and make a room listen, just by existing fully. I wasn't trending. I was trusted. And that was enough. One evening, back in Seoul, I received a message from Mr. Kong. "You've helped us see what we didn't know we were missing. Not just in business, but in leadership. Thank you for showing us how quiet strength moves nations." I closed my laptop and looked out the hotel window. The city glowed. That was the thing about quiet power. It doesn't just change deals. It changes how people lead after you've gone. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't need to. I just built something stronger, on my terms. And in doing so, I became the thing no one saw coming. Unshakable, unapologetic, and finally, unmistakably seen. Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers, and those whispers echo longer than any shout. Mila's journey reminds us that value isn't always visible on the surface. True influence often resides in consistency, integrity, and the unseen bridges we build over time. Being overlooked or underestimated doesn't diminish your worth. It simply means others haven't learned how to look properly. She didn't retaliate. She didn't beg for recognition. She walked away with grace, rebuilt on her own terms, and let the absence speak where presence had been ignored. Because real strength isn't about proving yourself to people who failed to see you. It's about choosing where to pour your energy, honoring the space you take up, and no longer waiting for permission to lead. Mila became undeniable, not by becoming louder, but by becoming uncompromisingly whole. And that's the lesson. Be still. Be clear. Be ready. The right people will notice. If you've ever been dismissed, ignored, or undervalued in a room where you gave your all, pause. But don't break. Your power isn't gone. It's simply waiting for a better room. Instead of fighting to stay somewhere you've outgrown, take inventory of what you've quietly mastered: relationships, insight, emotional intelligence, cultural fluency, resilience. These are your assets. Start reaching out. Rebuild, not to prove your worth, but to reclaim it. And when you do, don't be afraid to set boundaries. Choose silence over performance, or walk away with your dignity intact. Because true legacy isn't built through noise. It's built through unshakable clarity. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.